Hello and welcome to the Quick News Daily Podcast, where I give you the facts first, no clickbait stories, just real news that matters to real people. Today is Monday, December 28th, and welcome back after the long holiday weekend. I'm hoping you were all able to have a safe holiday, but that you were also able to connect somehow with family or friends, because this COVID fatigue and loneliness is real. Make no mistake about it. It is real. But wow, we have a ton of stuff to catch up on. Obviously, we'll take on the big stories of the bombing in Nashville and COVID updates, as well as some stories that may have gotten lost in the shuffle but are still important. We don't have a second to waste, so let's get caught up. Now, if you know the show, you know that I hate how the traditional news follows their unwritten rule of putting all of the crime and disasters first. The if it bleeds, it leads rule. I still hate that rule, but at the same time, I can't always just ignore those stories in favor of something else because that's my own rule. So, while I am starting with the Nashville story right away, I want to do that because I want to set the record straight. If these things just sit out there, that's when the conspiracy theories start to creep in, or maybe those theories are right and the official story is wrong. Whatever the case may be, I want you to have the facts as we understand them today. The official story, according to the Nashville Chief of Police, is that police officers responded on Friday, Christmas Day, to a report of shots fired when they encountered the RV that was projecting a recorded warning that a bomb would detonate in 15 minutes. The police evacuated nearby buildings and called in the bomb squad. Then the RV exploded shortly afterward, creating a massive fireball and explosion, but really no explosive damage aside from the fire. This took place on 2nd Avenue and Broadway in downtown Nashville. Upwards of 40 buildings were affected by the blast. Also, we have reporting from police that the bomber was playing this song right before the explosion.
When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can't always go downtown. When you've got worries, all the noise and the hurry seems to help, I know. Downtown.
Now, maybe it's just my age or where I come from, but that's just a song that the DJ plays at roller rinks. Like when I was a kid, that's what happened. He plays Downtown and then you crouch down and try to keep roller skating. It's the whole thing. You know, that's just what it is. It sounds fun and it's upbeat, and it actually is, but when you listen to the lyrics, it's basically saying you should go downtown if you're lonely because it'll make you happy. We'll get more into that in just a bit, but I think that shows this guy's mental state. Some of the more unofficial eyewitness testimony and amateur experts online help to color in some of the gaps that haven't been explained yet by the police. At the same time, I really want to emphasize that most of this has not been said by officials just yet, so take that for what it's worth. The real question to me is whether this guy was a professional or an amateur. The weird thing about the whole thing for me is the gunshots beforehand, and why there were multiple. I'm thinking it was one of three things. One, which isn't likely, because they're saying that there's only one bomber now. But one, the bombers were trying to commit suicide by, shooting each other somehow, like murder-suicide sort of thing. Two, the one bomber was bad at committing suicide if there was just one bomber. Or three, he wasn't really that good, and he accidentally started a fire in there, igniting a ton of ammo that was found later. So there was ammo in there, and then eventually that fire would also detonate the bomb. I have that third one in there because there were also reports of the police letting some ammo cook off after the explosion, meaning that they had to let the ammo ignite and go off before they could move in and put out the fires. That would be the explanation that says the bomber was an amateur. I say it might be a suicide for several reasons. First, there was that countdown timer telling everyone about the bomb, with a pretty good amount of time left on it, like 15-20 minutes for people to evacuate. Also, it sounds like the timing that was projected was actually pretty much correct, meaning that the accidental fire theory is no good because what are the chances that it ignites exactly when the countdown says it would, accidentally? However, there is also the small possibility that the countdown was to draw people into the street so that the bomb would kill more people. Going with the theory that the bomber did legitimately want people to leave, this also happened in a business district, specifically a district with a lot of bars and restaurants and only a small number of apartments. The bomber would probably know that, being Christmas, this place would be mostly deserted since all the stores are closed. Because there was that huge fireball, but a large amount of soot, some folks online were saying that those results would indicate that the bomber probably had a bad mixture or detonator, or both maybe, for his bomb. He probably used fuel oil to increase the yield, but that leads to an incomplete combustion, which causes the soot and the fireball but only a small amount of explosive damage. This means he could have been bad with making the bomb, but still good with the detonator, which points to the fact that he purposely detonated it after he heard about the bomb squad on the police scanner, which some people think he was probably listening to. It was also right outside a couple of AT&T buildings, so if he really did want people gone and evacuated, I'm guessing he was a disgruntled AT&T employee who wanted a very memorable suicide, but didn't actually want to kill bystanders, and that he was bad at shooting himself to commit suicide. Luckily for AT&T, their buildings were built during the Cold War. Since they're a communications company, they thought that they would be a prime target for a Soviet bombing should that ever happen, so they built these places like bunkers. According to people online who are familiar with that area and when it was being constructed, AT&T used extra concrete and rebar during the construction, so that should have helped limit the damage. But even though the AT&T building was built to withstand a bombing, it didn't work out perfectly, so they still had some major outages since one of their buildings contained a telephone exchange with network equipment in it. Police emergency systems in Tennessee, Kentucky, and Alabama, as well as Nashville's COVID community hotline and a handful of hospital systems, were still out of service as of Saturday, although they had 2 portable cell sites in the downtown area, as well as, quote, numerous additional portable sites being deployed in the Nashville area and in the region. The T-Mobile president of technology, Ray Neville, said they saw service disruptions all the way to Louisville, Knoxville, Birmingham, and Atlanta. The company was having a tough time cleaning up and getting things back online because they said they had a fire that reignited in the building overnight on Friday, so they had to evacuate it again. This also forced safety and structural engineers to be called in and eventually led to them drilling access holes into the building so that they could reconnect the power. FEMA released a report on Saturday that related to some tissue that was found at the scene. Honestly, I had no idea that FEMA did that sort of thing, but we'll just roll with it. Anyways, the samples that they collected did turn out to be human remains, but at that time they did not know who the remains belonged to. By Saturday, the FBI was already searching the home of a person of interest. Officially, the house is located in Antioch, a suburb of Nashville, and was found with the help of information they received that was relevant to the investigation. Some media outlets have already given out the name of the homeowner, but I'm going to skip doing that because that's what freaks like this are after. They're narcissists, they're victims in their own minds, and they desperately want someone to notice them. Sure, this guy is probably dead, that's what it looks like, but if the news didn't make them so famous, I don't think as many people would be committing these crimes as sort of copycats or that sort of thing. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation said that they started looking into this guy based on a tip from the public about a car of his, which contained a hat and gloves with DNA on them, so then they matched that up with the remains found at the scene of the bombing. What I will say about the bomber is that he is, or was, 63 years old, and police said that they were not looking for any other person in connection to this, so he operated alone. That being said, there was a copycat that was arrested yesterday, but he didn't have a bomb or anything. He was just playing a countdown message like the one that the real bomber was playing, and he had like a box car, so they had to shut the highway down and all that. The real bomber's dad worked for AT&T at one point, so that might have something to do with this. The bomber himself was an IT guy with experience in electronics and alarm systems. One of the neighbors described him as, quote, kind of low-key to the point of, I don't know, I guess some people would say he's a little odd, end quote. Honestly, if I can just jump in here as a person who's a little odd, to me that description sounds like this guy was kind of normal but just kept to himself. The way that the neighbor said, I guess some would say he's odd, sounds like this reporter was asking leading questions and trying to get the answer that they wanted. They want things to be neat and tidy and for this guy to fit the mold of like the Unabomber or something like that. So be careful when you hear things like this. The team at the Associated Press found that satellite images from May 2019 showed that a vehicle similar to the RV that exploded was in the backyard of this house. The AP also said that the reporters on the scene didn't see the vehicle anywhere on the property during the search on Saturday. Coincidence? The last thing that points to this guy being the bomber is that court records show that he transferred the ownership of his property to someone with a Los Angeles address on November 25th. So it sounds like he was definitely planning on this for a while. What I do want to reiterate is to be very, very careful with anything you read online about this that doesn't come straight from the chief of police or trusted news outlets, even local news if you can. Start looking at, I saw Channel 5 in Nashville was pretty good. And obviously we have very limited information at the moment. They don't even know what his motive was. So it's a little pointless to try to fill in the gaps. Sure, you can speculate a little bit, but I would say just be careful and know that most of the information that we know initially is wrong. Let's get a quick COVID update. Specifically, it's an update on the vaccine, and the headline you may have seen about the Boston doctor who had an allergic reaction after taking the Moderna COVID vaccine. However, it is important to know the context of the situation and what led to this. They didn't say how old he was, but they did describe him as geriatric, which honestly kind of seems strange to me, not because it's suspicious or anything, but you just don't hear that very often, at least in the news articles. But in addition to his age, the doctor also had a history of allergic reactions. His reaction started about 6 to 7 minutes after he had taken the vaccine, when his heart rate jumped all the way up to 150, and that's beats per minute. He mentioned his usual heart rate is around 75, so double. Then he felt a tingling or a sort of numbness in both his throat and his tongue before he used his EpiPen. The staff then rushed him over to the ER, where he was treated and released. The doctor was actually the one who talked to the press, so I'm even more confused on why they didn't give out his age. It's not like they had to worry about HIPAA or something if he's the one who's giving out the info. In any case, he said, quote, "If people know that they have the severe allergy, take the vaccine in the right setting, in a hospital setting, so at least there is appropriate care as needed," end quote. Officially, this is the first case of an allergic reaction to the Moderna version of the COVID vaccine, although the company says that they're still investigating the case through their internal safety reporting system. Again, I'm no doctor or scientist, but the fact that it's happening to people for both vaccines makes me think that it's an ingredient of the vaccine, not the COVID part itself. I don't know the specifics, but from what I understand, they have to bond the virus to some sort of protein in order for your body to take it as a threat and fight it, or at least keep the virus part alive, because it needs a host of some sort. One of those two things, again, not a scientist, but the protein that they used is what's found in eggs. It's also found in eggs, I should say. That's why folks with an egg allergy can't usually take the flu shot, although now they've come out with the non-egg-based flu shots, which do help. My best guess is that because they're so new, they don't have that option here, so people who usually take the special flu shot are still getting the COVID vaccine, which is why these are flaring up. I still haven't talked that much about the special Senate election in Georgia, but I do want to highlight some things from a CNN article. They ran a fact check on some highly misleading ads that were run by the Republicans Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. The first fact check is about an ad from Loeffler that attacks her opponent, Reverend Raphael Warnock. The ad takes clips out of context to suggest that Warnock wants to release people from prison, no matter what they're in prison for. In reality, the full quote is, quote, "Marijuana is seen as an illegal substance. It's a terrible irony, and we feel it, that right now in America, there are some folk who are becoming billionaires for selling the same stuff that's got our children locked up all across America. Where's the justice? It's not enough to decriminalize marijuana. Somebody's got to open up the jails and let our children go." End quote. Except they only use that last little line there about letting our children go. So no, he's not advocating for releasing everyone. He's simply suggesting that marijuana offenses should not be keeping people in prison. As for David Perdue, he's running an ad about Jon Ossoff that makes it sound like Ossoff could be federally investigated the minute he's elected to the Senate. They say that because he didn't include payments from a Hong Kong media company and from Al Jazeera in his Senate financial disclosure forms. First of all, Ossoff is the CEO of a company that makes investigative films, so it's not hard to figure out why foreign media companies are giving money to another media company. Second, Ossoff filed an amendment to his original forms this past July that disclosed 11 more payments from media companies, including these ones. And Perdue has filed his own amendments in the past. Really, they're very common among senators, House representatives, just in general. Third, it was the Georgia Republican Party that asked for a Senate Ethics Committee investigation, but just anybody can send a letter to that committee. I could send a letter and ask for Barack Obama to run for a third term. It's just not a serious challenge or charge or anything like that. There is no evidence that any investigation has started. And finally, attacking him specifically over the payments from Hong Kong and Al Jazeera. What do they have in common? Come on, Republicans, you have to try harder than that. It's just so predictable that they'd attack Asians and a company with a name from the Middle East. I guess you have to meet your quota to be a racist somehow. Back to the topic of COVID, I read this article in NBC News about some of the psychological effects of this extended period of social distancing and not going out. Dr. Robert Lustig from UC San Francisco says that prolonged traumatic stress, also called toxic stress, which is what I'm sure we've all had at some point during this pandemic, if not throughout the pandemic. Dr. Lustig says that this type of stress releases the stress hormone cortisol into our brains for a long period of time, which sort of tranquilizes our prefrontal cortex. In English, this long-term chronic stress makes this part of our brain that controls our impulses to reward ourselves. It makes that part of our brain weaker. Going back to more technical terms, dopamine is the hormone that makes us feel rewarded. It makes us feel good. The prefrontal cortex keeps this hormone in check. So when that part of our brain is weakened, that dopamine basically turns into an out-of-control drug addict who just needs more and more and more. So what does this look like during this quarantine period? Dr. Lustig says it causes us to turn chemical rewards, like cocaine, heroin, nicotine, alcohol, sugar, etc., or behavioral rewards like shopping, gambling, internet gaming, social media, etc. Maybe it's just because I'm trying to rationalize myself, but isn't it just a bit extreme to be mentioning sugar in the same sentence as cocaine, heroin, and alcohol? I'm sure that chemically they're just as addictive and all that, but if you overdose on sugar one time, you might just feel sick. Whereas you can overdose any time when you take heroin, no matter the amount you take. Also, you can have sugar every day of your life and probably be okay. I mean, you'll probably have something wrong. But let me know how it goes if you take cocaine every single day of your life. But I digress. There were some pretty notable stats in this article. First, total cookbook sales increased by 15% during the first 9 months of the year, but bread-based cookbook sales grew by 145%. Bread contains carbohydrates, which are sugar. I'm not trying to talk down to anyone, I just probably wouldn't have made that connection myself if they hadn't said it in this article here. At the same time, vegetarian and other quote-unquote healthy cookbooks saw their sales decrease in March and April. When it came to shopping, this year's Cyber Monday was the biggest online shopping day in U.S. history, not just the history of Cyber Mondays. This year, people bought $10.7 billion worth of stuff. Just as a side note here, the article uses this as proof that we're searching harder for gratification this year by online shopping, but in reality, I'm pretty sure Black Friday numbers were way down this year. It's not like the people spent a ton on Black Friday and Cyber Monday, just because they like clicking place order. They just didn't feel safe going into stores, so I kinda call BS on this one. One of the sets of stats that was most surprising to me was the section on alcohol. In April, online alcohol sales were more than 500% higher than last year's April online sales. Although, again, a large reason for this is probably just that people didn't want to go to stores and more places offered alcohol online. One stat that seems very real to me is the tendency for women to be the most vulnerable to stress drinking during quarantine. The article says that this is mainly due to insecurity in their jobs and increased social isolation. Women's jobs were 1.8 times more vulnerable during the COVID crisis than men's jobs, and a study from July showed that women made up 39% of the worldwide workforce, but they were also responsible for 54% of the global job losses. Worldwide, 743 million, that's with an M, girls have been forced out of school. When you combine all that with the facts that moms were also disproportionately asked to be the homeschool teachers for their kids, and violence against women increased since everyone is confined with each other, it's easy to see why alcohol is a cheap way to escape these awful circumstances. The last group of stats I want to go over relates to smoking. In recent years in the US, tobacco sales have been decreasing. However, these numbers started to stabilize from March through October. These companies think this is due to the stress, sure, but also the fact that some Americans actually had a lot more disposable income from doing fewer social activities and getting those stimulus checks. At first I thought this was a really dumb way to cope with a pandemic that mainly attacks your lungs, but then I realized that it's just more sad because people are so desperate to deal with the stress that they'll actually do something that they know will hurt them if they get the virus. Well, it just hurts them in general, but even more so with COVID. So when it comes down to it, the real question is, why do we do these things that are unhealthy if we know that they won't make us happy for very long? Professor Laurie Santos of Yale University says that our brains are wired to make a difference between wanting things and liking things. She says, quote, "Wanting is a motivational process. Liking is how you're going to feel when you get it." End quote. Basically, the best analogy is actually part of this article. Santos is saying that wanting is like eating vegetables, but liking is like a really good cheeseburger and fries. We would all like to be healthy, but we want the food that actually tastes good. She says that, quote, "We don't have wanting for things that are going to work." And she says that we also don't realize that these social interactions, no matter how small they are what is missing in our lives. She closes out the article with two important quotes. First, she says that, quote, buying new material possessions just simply doesn't make us as happy as we think. In fact, we'd be better off spending money on other people. Doing nice things for others seems to be actually a thing that makes us happy over time, end quote. Then she goes into why we should all be looking forward to the end of the pandemic on a psychological level. She says, quote, after lockdown, we're going to get these amazing fresh starts on the routines we have, how we interact, who we interact with. It really will give us opportunities to build in more positive habits and use what we learned during this time to create a more nutritious life for ourselves, end quote. So that was an extended dive, but I thought it was important. Maybe you're feeling these things or noticing these things about yourself and you feel guilty. I think the big thing to take away is that so many other people are going through this exact same thing, especially if you listen to this show, because you're more likely to be taking this seriously and taking safety precautions seriously. Everyone has to do it their own way. But I think we should be doing pretty much whatever we need to get through this at the moment, and focus on setting goals or something like that for when we're vaccinated and can get on with our lives. Hey, alright, I think that's going to do it for us here today. Thanks for sticking with me through those two really long stories. I don't usually do those. The one on the bombing and the one on COVID stress. I hope they brought you some benefit and that you stuck through them and listened to all of them. But as always, you can leave feedback a number of different ways, but especially on Apple Podcasts. You can rate and or review us there. 5 stars are preferred, but I do listen to any and all feedback there. It is Monday, so it's time to thank our special contributors, our executive producer Gwen and our producer Kathy. As always, the support does mean so much. It's looking like tomorrow might be another busy show, so that might be kind of fun. Not sure about the rest of the week though, with New Year's and all that coming up. In any case, stay safe out there, folks, and I hope to see you right back here for the next episode.
When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown. When you've got worries, all the noise and the hurry seems to help, I know. Downtown, just listen to the music of the traffic in the city. Linger on the sidewalk where the neon signs are pretty. How can you lose? The lights are much brighter there. You can't forget all your troubles, forget all your cares, so go downtown. Things will be great when you're downtown. No finer place for sure, downtown. Everything's waiting for you. Downtown. Don't hang around and let your problems surround you. There are movie shows downtown. Maybe you know some little places to go to where they never close. Downtown, just listen to the rhythm of a gentle bossa nova. You'll be dancing with them too before the night is over. Happy again. The lights are much brighter there. You can't forget all your troubles, forget all your cares, so go down.